rental in its level of attentiveness. These relationships can become very close.
I do have a relation with the translators. I enjoy it very much.
A.S. Byers.
They are my friends. They're my very high-powered friends. Also, of course, all of them, or many of them, have been sources of bits of my novels. Melanie lives in Munich, and I said it's come to me that I have to set part of the children's book in Munich because of the Puppet Museum. So we went to Munich. She took me around every museum and bought me heaps of books about books. And I would not have known, I wouldn't have dared write about German culture without that particular translator.
We don't need to meet. I mean, I would love to sit down with Bill Shakespeare or Pitt Marlowe. These things are not available to us. So no, it doesn't require personal knowledge.
One thing everyone seems to agree on is that there's an essential impossibility at the heart of translation. Languages aren't the same. They can't be made to do the same things. Writers must, at some point, let go of the idea that they can control their translations or perfect them. This may be particularly true when it comes to English. We have the largest vocabulary of any language in the world, so meaning will probably always be missing when translating from English into other languages.
I think that's true, and as a writer I'm extremely conscious of that problem all the time, partly because when I was a schoolgirl I studied Paradise Lost, and one of the things I learned from Milton was that the English language is at its best when it clashes the Latinate against the Anglo-Saxon. So you have a followed by a sort of wonderfully long, florid word. And I do that on purpose. And of course, neither the Nordic translators nor the Italians and the Spanish can do that. I suspect it's easier for the Spanish than the Italians because I read somewhere that the English language has the most words of any, and the Spanish is second. So they must have much more options of variants than very precise French and very precise Italian, which are small vocabularies that the beauty of which is different. Some Frenchman has just written a book saying you can think better with French because it has less alternatives. So they don't like ambiguity. The French don't like it. They try to disambiguate, whereas I think ambiguity is beautiful. And that goes back to this nature of the English language with its many sources.
When you finish a book, you know, we send a book out there and it's now finished. That's it. Basically, we can answer some questions about it, but we cannot drive the interpretation. So that if someone gets in touch with us with questions about things which we may have an interpretation of, we better be careful not to force it on them. It's not fair. The book exists out there in the world on its own terms. Actually, do you know what? I'm going to talk about Merete Alfsen, who's my Norwegian translator, who will come to me with real problems and say, I cannot translate this. For instance, there's a novel I wrote called Hotel World, in which there's a segment in which a character falls down a well and she is ill, and the relationship between well and ill is played on as kind of fun in this passage. Merete said, I can't do this. I can't find the same beat for it. What am I going to do? So we had a chat and we said, well, what about, are there any fish who sound like illness or wellness? She said, oh yes, there's the soup, which is the same word for sick. So can I play on that? So she did. She went and played on just water elements, water references, and rewrote the passage for a Norwegian writer. Now that's right. That's not hindering. But I think that release is exactly what it's about.
هذا هو الشكل الصحيح. هذه ليست
Coming back to the translation slam here with the translators Adriana Hunter, Frank Wynne and Danny Hahn. The next bit of Around the World in 80 Days that I'd love us to have a look at is this section. The Andrew Stewart, who's having an argument with Phileas Fogg, is trying to convince him that he couldn't possibly go around the world in 80 days, and one of the points that he raises is même si les Hindus ou les Indiens enlèvent les râles. So, what he's saying there is something that perhaps in modern language we might find a bit racist. So we all have, again, different versions of it. Danny, do you want to start with yours?
And what if the Hindu or the Red Indians make off with the tracks?
Frank.
And if the Hindus or the Indians should rip up the tracks?
And Adriana.
Even if the Indians or the Red Indians pull up the rails?
And I had, but what if the Hindu or the Sioux pull up the rails? Which which was a bit controversial of me.
I thought it was a very inventive way of doing it, because me simply saying, or the Indians, the trouble is that it's possible that I mean separate people on the same continent, whereas by having the Sioux or by having Red Indian, you make it very clear.
I was very aware of the fact that in French the two words sound incredibly similar, even though they're oceans apart, les Hindous and les Indiens. And I wanted to recreate that, and for me the only way to do that was to have Indians and Red Indians. And I thought, this was written in the 1870s. Present day sensibilities about saying Native American just don't come anywhere. They were just irrelevant.
As of having these two things which sound a bit the same
They
and
had
are
to
sort of vaguely the same, actually is completely appropriate for the person who's speaking at the time he was
Exactly.
speaking.
He thought he was being terribly clever. The Indians, all the Red Indians. Ha ha, do you see what I did there?
Yes, I suppose I just couldn't bring myself to do it. I just couldn't make myself write Red Indian.
But it's not you that's saying it. That's the thing with translation.
Indeed.
I'm not racist. I'm not racist. You are racist. C'est Jules Verne.
Il y a un raciste.
Ich bin nicht der Rassist. Jules Verne ist der Rassist. I'm starting to suspect that my instincts as a novelist might be quite wrong for the job of translating. I want to say what I think. But the audience, the readers, want to hear what Jules Verne thought and believed, even if it was a bit racist. I'm talking blithely about what the audience wants, of course. But it's far from clear that this audience actually exists. Only 3% of novels published in the UK are in translation, and most of those are crime stories. Anglophones tend to read far fewer novels in translation than speakers of other languages. David Baddiel.
It's my position as a 48-year-old man that I don't have that much time left in my life, and I could quite easily fill my reading time with great books in English that I haven't read yet. So, I'm sure I will read a book in translation again in my life, but honestly, I very, very rarely buy them.
I do admire translators. If I'm completely sort every now and then I do look up and thank them mentally for providing me with this.
Ian McEwan.
To look on my bookshelves in the fiction section in my study, I guess about a third or so of the novels there are in translation. And the moment I first read Kafka or Thomas Mann in my early 20s, I just have since then always remained in debt. Where would we be with all those Russians that have rearranged the furniture of our minds? Where would we be with those translations?
Don't get me wrong, obviously. I'm not saying I don't think anyone should ever read it into translation, but I personally, when I read them, can never get away from the nagging feeling that I'm not getting the entire experience of flavour of translation. If I give you the start of Madame Bovary, the first sentence is, "We were at preparation when the headmaster came in, followed by a new boy dressed in civvies, in inverted commas, and a school servant carrying a big desk." That is from Alan Russell's classic 1950 translation. That's a terrible sentence. Carrying a big desk. This is a writer who obsessed about the mot juste. Right? Carrying a big desk, and also civvies in inverted commas, means that in the first sentence the translators thought, I don't know, can't really get this word, I'm going to have to suggest it with inverted commas.
And
That's
suggesting something there about the army, which is not necessarily particularly relevant to the first sentence.
Yeah, no, exactly, civvies. And so I guess, as time has gone on, I've just got more and more convinced that prose is part and parcel of what makes a novel great. And I don't intend to feel, for example, that if you were to read a book by John Updike in French, I just don't believe the French translator is as good a writer as John Updike. He or she just won't be. And so therefore you're getting 70% of the experience.
So in a sense what you need is for all really great writers to volunteer their time to translate other really great writers.
Yeah, or to be like Nabokov and be able to write in 15 different languages.
It's a problem. I think translation is a bit like saying, if you can write a poem, you can write a song. Of course you can.
Ali Smith.
They're very different forms. I think translation is, in a way, its own form. And I really do consider translators, as creative, if not much more creative than the original writer. They have to be, and they have to have both the skill and the generosity to be able to be open to the source and at the same time to create something new.
But as a reader, I find myself getting very annoyed with certain translators. And I don't like reading in translation, even if it's very, very good, because I like to relate to the words people wrote.
Perhaps the problem with bad translations is that they remind us that we are not Nabokov. If it were possible, we'd probably all like to be fluent readers in every language. So, is translation just disagreeable necessity? an intermediary between the reader and the text that we do what we could.